It's 6:44 on a Monday morning, and you're sitting in a 2010 Ford Focus in the parking lot of a beverage distribution warehouse off Route 12, waiting for your hands to warm up before you go inside. The heater in the Focus takes 11 minutes to do anything useful. You know this because you've timed it. There's a dent in the rear bumper from a shopping cart that rolled into it 18 months ago in a grocery store lot, and you never got it fixed because it doesn't affect anything except how the car looks. And you stopped caring how the car looks around the same time you stopped needing it to say anything about you. A guy named Corey pulls in 3 spaces down in a leased Ram 2500, brand new, the kind that sits high enough off the ground that he has to step down out of it. He works dispatch, same building, different floor. He waves, you wave back. Corey's truck payment is $580 a month. Your brokerage account, as of last night, sits at $186,400. Corey doesn't know that. Nobody in this building knows that. Your supervisor doesn't know it. The woman at the front desk, who's seen you jumpstart the Focus twice this winter, doesn't know it either. And she's not wrong to assume what she assumes. You're not hiding it. It just never comes up. Nobody asks a warehouse dispatcher what his portfolio looks like. There's no natural opening for that sentence in a normal Monday. And if there were, you're honestly not sure you'd take it. Here's the part nobody puts in the thumbnail. Getting quietly wealthy doesn't feel like a finish line. Most mornings, it just feels like sitting in a cold car, waiting for the heater to catch up. You grab your thermos, you lock the Focus, which still requires an actual key, not a fob, and you walk into a building to start a shift that stopped being financially necessary 2 years ago, though almost nobody watching you walk through that door would guess it. This is that story. It starts 11 years earlier, in a 1-bedroom above a dry cleaner, with $190 in checking and a mattress that's still on the box spring, because a frame felt like a purchase for a version of you that hadn't shown up yet. You're 22. Rent is $825. The job pays $16.90 an hour, loading trucks before sunrise. And some weeks there's overtime, and some weeks the schedule just doesn't give you any. The Focus is already 5 years old when you get it, bought off a coworker's cousin for $4,100 cash. Money you'd spent a summer scraping together, doing landscaping on weekends. There's a man at the warehouse named Gene, late 50s, been there before the building had the new loading bays. Drinks his coffee black out of a thermos older than you are. He's not your supervisor. He runs receiving. One afternoon, waiting on a pallet jack, he says something you don't think about again for almost a year. Whatever you're going to save, he says, save it the day it lands. Don't wait for a good week to do it. There's no such thing as a good week when you're 22. Then the pallet jack frees up and he's gone. And that's it. No follow-up, no lecture. You don't do anything with it for 4 months. Then a flyer goes up in the break room about the company's retirement match. 50 cents on the dollar up to 3%. And the phrase, free money, finally lands the way it's supposed to. You set your contribution to 3% on your phone during lunch. It comes out to $19 a paycheck. You don't feel it leave. That's the whole mechanism, though you don't understand that yet. 5 months after that, you open a separate account on your own, a plain taxable brokerage, and set up an automatic transfer of $50 a month into an index fund you picked because it was the top result and the fees were low. $50 a month doesn't feel like anything. It's 2 tanks of gas. But it's the first money in your adult life that leaves before you get a say in it, every single time. Then the Focus needs a starter, $290, and you don't have it sitting anywhere easy. For 3 days, you seriously consider pulling the $50 back out to cover it. You don't. You put it on a card instead and pay it down over 2 months, irritated at yourself the entire time. That tug of war between the transfer that already left and the bill screaming for your attention right now becomes the actual shape of the next several years, more than any single decision does. 2 years pass, then 3. Nothing happens, and that's not a complaint, that's just accurate. You get a raise to $19.10 an hour, and instead of upgrading anything, you bump the transfer to $125 a month, mostly because you never adjusted your spending to match the raise in the first place. The extra money simply had nowhere else assigned to go. Corey gets hired around this time. Dispatch floor, same shift rotation. He's not reckless. He's not making an obvious mistake by any normal measure. He gets his first promotion about a year before you get yours. And he leases the Ram the same month he gets the bump. $580 a month. 6 years. He worked for it. You don't judge him for it, though you notice the number, mostly because it's close to what you pay in rent. If you lined the two of you up in that parking lot on any given Tuesday, nobody would be able to guess which one of you was quietly building something and which one was spending it as it landed. You pay off a $2,200 credit card balance that had been sitting there since a bad month involving a root canal. And once it hits zero, you redirect that same payment straight into the transfer, instead of letting it evaporate back into your checking account. Nobody throws a party for that. There isn't one to throw. By 25, the retirement account and the brokerage combined cross $9,800. You know because you check on a Sunday out of boredom, not because it's a milestone anyone announces. It's a number next to your email and your grocery list. Nothing more dramatic than that. At 27, a bigger raise lands, and the contribution moves to $300 a month without much ceremony. That same year, a guy from your building named Aaron, who works upstairs in accounts, buys a townhouse. New car in the driveway, a lease, a kitchen renovation he posts pictures of. By every visible measure, Aaron is doing better than you. You don't know yet, and won't know for years, that his mortgage runs $2,100 a month against a salary not far from yours, or that the renovation went on a card he's still carrying a balance on. None of that's a judgment. It's just a different set of decisions, made with roughly the same information you had. 2 months after your 27th birthday, the market drops 21% over 5 weeks. Your $46,000 becomes $36,300 in a stretch of days that feel much longer than they are. You check the account more than you'd like to admit, and for the first time since Gene's comment by the pallet jack, discipline stops being a theory and turns into something you actually have to do on purpose. The transfer is still scheduled for the 15th. You think seriously about pausing it. Everything is red. Sending $300 in feels like feeding a fire. You don't pause it. You're honestly not sure, even years later, whether that was wisdom or just the fact that stopping it would have required a decision, and you'd built a life that avoided extra decisions about money. 6 months after the bottom, the account isn't just back to $46,000. It's past $58,000. The drop that scared you turns out, in hindsight, to have been the best 5 weeks of buying you ever got, because every share that month cost less than it had in March. If you've ever sat there watching a number you built go red and had to decide whether to trust the plan or your own gut, you already know why we make these. If that part landed for you, go ahead and hit subscribe now, because the next stretch of this story is where it actually gets interesting. Around 29, a real temptation shows up. Not a crash, a choice. Corey's Ram needs a transmission the same month your Focus starts making a sound on cold mornings that a mechanic eventually calls a failing wheel bearing. $380 to fix. Nothing urgent, nothing that demands a new car. But you pull up a dealership site one night anyway, half as a joke. A newer sedan, nothing fancy, payment would run $310 a month for 5 years. You do the math without meaning to. $310 a month is more than your entire investment contribution at the time. You sit with that fact longer than you expect to. You don't buy the car. You fix the wheel bearing instead. But something in you shifts that night. Not toward austerity exactly, more toward a clear sense that every dollar already has a job, and the job it's doing is one you don't want to interrupt. By 30, the combined accounts sit at $101,000, and the number stops feeling abstract. It's the first one that's real, in a way $9,800 never was. It's a down payment. It's a year and a half of rent. It starts a different conversation in your head, one where you begin asking what any of this is actually for. At 32, something starts happening you don't notice right away because it doesn't announce itself. You check the account on a Sunday, and it's grown by $2,300 from the month before. You contributed $650 of that. The rest showed up on its own. It happens again the next month, in a different amount. Some months, the market gives more than you put in. Some months, it takes some back. But averaged across the year, the growth from money already invested starts running close to the growth from money you're actively adding. The paycheck and the portfolio start pulling near equal weight. And because nobody warns you this moment is coming, you almost miss it entirely. It isn't a bell ringing. It's a quiet handoff in who's doing the actual work. That winter, the water heater goes. $1,240. The kind of bill that would have needed a card and a few sleepless nights 3 years earlier. This time, you pay it from the emergency fund, without checking any other balance first. It doesn't even occur to you to look. That part is new. Corey's truck payment is still $580 a month, 7 years in now, because he refinanced into a newer one the day the first was paid off. He's not miserable about it. He likes the truck. You don't judge him for it. He makes more than you on paper, and he can afford the choice he's making. It's just a different choice than the one quietly compounding in your account. The Focus passes 170,000 miles that same year. The bumper dent is still there. You look up the cost to fix it once, $260, and decide it's not worth the trip to the shop. That decision has stopped being about the money at this point. It's just habit now, the same way some people always take the aisle seat. At 34, a shift supervisor role opens up. An $8,600 raise, but also weekend rotations and a level of visibility you'd have chased hard 5 years earlier. You turn it down, not because you can't handle it, but because when you actually sit with the number, weighed against 60 extra hours a month you'll never get back, it doesn't move anything that matters anymore. The combined accounts are past $325,000 by then. The math has shifted far enough that an extra $8,600 a year buys less freedom than those 60 hours would cost you. This is the first purely financial decision in the whole story that has nothing to do with saving money. It's about refusing to trade time for a number that stopped needing you. That spring, your father's furnace dies in February, $6,400 to replace. An emergency by any normal measure. You send the money without discussing terms, without a spreadsheet, without checking whether you can afford it first, because you already know you can. He tries to argue. You tell him it's handled. It's the easiest $6,400 decision you've ever made, and the ease of it is the part that actually surprises you. A friend from high school, Nate, reaches out that same year about a business opportunity. A vending machine route that needs a $12,000 buy-in and promises returns that don't hold up under any calculation you run twice. 5 years earlier, the promised number alone might have pulled you in. Now, you can see the shape of it clearly enough to walk away without agonizing over it. You still drive the Focus. People at the warehouse have started asking, gently, if you're ever going to replace it. You tell them you're thinking about it. You've been thinking about it for 4 years. The truth is, the car stopped saying anything true about you a long time ago. It didn't tell the real story when it represented being broke, and it doesn't now when it represents something closer to indifference. At 36, the accounts crossed $612,000. On paper, you're what most people mean when they say wealthy. Nobody in your life would guess it, and that was more or less the plan, though the plan came with a cost you didn't see coming. Corey asks you one night over beers, half joking, if you're ever going to catch up to where he is. He means the truck, the townhouse he's renting to own, the vacations he posts. You laugh along and don't correct him, and driving home afterward in the Focus, you feel something you don't have a clean word for. Not superiority, not regret. Something closer to distance, the sense that you and Corey have worked in the same building for 11 years, and somehow ended up somewhere that can't be measured on the same scale. And neither of you can say that out loud without it sounding like an insult either way. Your mother asks, carefully, if you're doing all right for money. She's seen the Focus still parked outside your place, still dented, and worries the way mothers do. You tell her you're fine. You don't give her the number, because the number would change how she talks to you, how family gatherings feel from that point forward. You watched it happen to a cousin who came into money and became, overnight, the rich one, a role that flattened every other part of who he was. You're not ready to become a role. Around then, you start seeing Jenna. She works as a paramedic, drives a 9-year-old Elantra with a check engine light she stopped noticing, and the first time she's at your place, she sees a brokerage statement on the counter by accident. She doesn't say much. A few weeks later she mentions, almost sideways, that she's been meaning to open an account of her own, but never got around to it. You think about Jean and the pallet jack, and the sentence that took a year to matter, and you just tell her, save it the day it lands. Not the good week, the day it lands. She laughs, not because it's funny, because it's such a small sentence to be carrying something so large. The wealth doesn't change how you see yourself, not in any dramatic way. What it changes is quieter and stranger than that. The awareness that the version of you everyone else sees, the Focus, the dented bumper, the guy who says he's thinking about a new car, is real, but incomplete. You're not performing broke. You're just not performing anything. And it turns out, most people build their sense of who you are entirely out of what you choose to show them. It's 6:44 on a Monday morning again, a different Monday, years further into it, and you're sitting in the same Focus outside the same warehouse, waiting for the same heater to catch up. Corey's Ram is gone, traded twice since, replaced by something bigger, with a payment he mentioned last week, the same way you'd mentioned the weather. Your account this morning reads $842,300. You could fix the bumper. You could buy something that would finally match the number instead of contradicting it. You've thought about it more seriously this year than any year before it. You don't do it today. Some habits outlive the reason you started them and turn into something else entirely. Not proof of scarcity anymore, just a preference for a car that starts every cold morning and asks nothing of you in return. Jean retired 3 winters ago. You never told him what his sentence turned into. You think, some mornings, about tracking him down just to say it plainly. You saved it the day it landed, and you kept doing that for 14 years, and one ordinary Monday, it became a number too large to explain in a parking lot conversation. You grab your thermos, you lock the Focus. It still takes the actual key. And you walk toward a building that has no idea what it's looking at. That's the real ending of getting quietly rich. Not a reveal, not a room full of people finding out at once. Just you, still early for a shift you don't need, still driving a car worth less than the tires on Corey's truck. Carrying a number that changed everything, except how this particular morning looks from the outside. If this story stuck with you, you know what to do. Tap subscribe so the next one finds you the same way this one did. And here's the question I actually want an answer to. If nobody could see your bank account, ever, not one person, would you still be chasing the same things you're chasing right now? Tell me the honest answer in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.